very rare there. It's sort of the limit is Syracuse, New York, the real limit. There are other subgenera of Xylocopa in the New World, but the subgenus to which this species belongs is more typically an Old World subgenus, arrived in the last 10 or 20,000 years or so. The major separation from New World and Old World carpenter bees, though, occurred during the separation of South America from Africa, shortly after the time of the extinction of the great dinosaurs. Of course, the dinosaurs didn't all go. The birds are an example of a living but specialized group of dinosaurs, but are descended from two-legged carnivorous dinosaurs nonetheless. She's pretty much got most of this pollen off herself now, and she's mixing up the dough, but she's going to get pretty dirty with it and end up trying to bloom it off herself shortly. Incidentally, this paleontological history I just quoted is the work of Robert L. Winkley, then at the University of Arizona at Tucson. He also did some work at Kansas University in Lawrence, Kansas with Charles B. Michener since then on Xylocopa, but has now struck out on his own in his own lab in Alabama. She's having a good time. Notice the funny gangly-like, spider-like position of her legs during this phase of the preparation. She gets into some pretty comical positions when she's doing all this. And I have a feeling that these bees would probably be disconcerted if they knew we saw them at these moments. They look much less dignified than they usually do when they're preparing their bee bread. I regret the waterfall problem because kneading of the bee bread produces all kinds of interesting sounds too. Professor R.H. Watmouth in Pretoria, South Africa, compared many species of Xylocopa there by the sounds they made when kneading their bee breads. Some sound like they're growling while they're doing it. These sounds are probably used to prevent the bee bread from sticking to them while they're working it. We'll see shortly other important purposes that this sonication has during bee bread handling when the egg is being laid, or just prior to the laying of the egg. The bee can control whether the bee bread is harder than her or softer than her, depending on whether she's producing sound or not. Incidentally, this is the first time that this behavior has ever been observed, as far as I know, in visible light. Previous studies were done with X-rays. Professor John B. Simeoni at the University of Syracuse did a great deal of work with X-ray stills on these bees in the 60s. Prior to that, most work was done destructively by simply chopping the nest open. Seems quite barbaric by contrast. Here's someone begging for food. If the mother were going to capitulate, she'd turn upside down while the beggar was right side up, and they'd interlock their heads and their front legs in the food exchange, or trophallaxis, as it's called, would occur. In most social insects, both of them would be right side up or both of them upside down during trophallaxis. But in Xylocopa and bees, one of them is upside down while the other one is right side up. I believe we have a bit of a rainstorm outside. You can hear it. Very often the bees come in from the field just before it rains, so it's very common on these tapes to have a sequence where the bee comes in and unloads her food immediately prior to a thunderstorm. The camera had to be especially protected by plastic tarps because the camera is in fact outdoors shooting through the door of the shed at this time on the telephoto lens. It's important that the investigator, namely myself here, be far away from the shed during these shots because the bees can somehow sense the presence of a person and perceive this as a predator and will often fail to perform if they know they're being watched. Here we are in a different sequence in the same nest. We're now at the end of the tunnel on the opposite side of the entrance. That is the east side of the entrance. We're facing south. Okay, we can see a bee bred in a cell there, and we see a bee bred almost ready to receive the egg. And the mother...
Change the battery.
Well, we had to change the battery. Oh well, so we lost a few seconds. The mother is getting ready to oviposit, or that is to lay her egg, or deposit her egg. Okay, the mother is getting ready to oviposit. The helper is on the right. The bee bread is... Oops. Okay.
We had to change the battery there. We got some artificial light, but not much. Don't want to disturb them. The artificial light seems to be jumping out on us. Okay, we're going to read the clock off. It's 5:15.
That's daylight savings time. Okay, the helper's on the right, the bee bread is sort of in the middle. The mother is crawling over the bee bread. She's sonicating, so it's softer than she is. She makes it sort of saddle shape and she wades through it. She's going to end up between the end of the cell and the bee bread, where she'll become somewhat formless like an amoeba, to exaggerate a bit. We'll do a somersault, and then she'll crawl back over the bee bread again, this time without sonication, so it will be harder than she is. And she'll bunch it together with her legs and squeeze her body between the ceiling and the bee bread, and literally squeeze the egg out of herself. And it will be squeezed out like toothpaste, like so much whipped cream across the top of a Hostess cupcake. Just a streak across the top of the bee bread. The egg of Xylocopa is the largest known insect egg known to man. The purpose of the clapping is to inform the camera of my distance from the nest as I walk off into the woods and leave the camera to run by itself. The helper is doing the curious rotator dance originally described by R.H. Watmouth. She will rotate on her back, on her side, on her right side up, on her other side. And this is primarily a heat generating mechanism to keep the mother warm while she's preparing this cell just before